Hello. Ooh, that's loud. Love it. So that was basically my presentation. Thank you. Hi, I'm Tracy. Nice to meet you all. This is my first time in Barcelona. My talk is very practical. I have a lot of recommendations and websites I'm going to share. And you don't have to take photos really quickly if you find a piece of information that you want to save. The conference should share the video and the slides, but I also will share it immediately after this talk on my Twitter account. So that's my Twitter account. How many in this audience consider themselves primarily product people? So designers or developers or people who build products. Now, if you are one of those people, keep your hands up if you like to do marketing. Hands are like, "Wah." I totally hear you. My background is in design. I have a design degree from a university in California. And then about 8 or so years ago, I taught myself how to program Python and then became a developer. So I kind of do design and development. And my title, I call myself entrepreneur because I like to make money on the internet. There's no good way of saying that. An entrepreneur sounds so bleh. So I'm an entrepreneur. I like to make money on the internet. And because I like to build products, I have to do marketing. And let me tell you, it is my least favorite thing to do, which is kind of funny considering I'm on stage telling you about marketing. But this is kind of the collection of all the tips and tricks and things that I've learned over the years of launching my products and learning about marketing and growing what I've built. The thing is that when you are building an app, as was mentioned, you can't just build it and then the world will be like, there it is, and all the people you want to see it will come. There's this quote that says, "We estimate that up to 2/3 of the apps in leading consumer app store catalogs receive fewer than 1,000 downloads in their first year, and a significant portion of those get none at all." Which sucks. And it doesn't just mean that the bad apps aren't seen. There's a lot of really, really amazing apps out there that also aren't seen because the right people don't know about it. And you know what? Marketing is really hard. Marketing takes a lot of mental energy. There's the chance, there's a chance that people are going to tell you that they don't like what you've built. There's going to be negative reviews. There's going to be a lot of awkward moments. But when it goes well, when you market what you've built and it gets into the hands of people who need what you've built and you start getting reviews of people say, hey, this is awesome, this has changed my company or my life in some way, shape, or form, it is so, so awesome. So the time spent on marketing is absolutely, absolutely worth it. So this talk will be very practical. It's going to be a lot of tips and tricks. I'm going to try to go through the entire app development lifecycle and give tips for every area of designing, developing, building, launching, and marketing your app. So what can you do to ensure that your app gets seen? Now, I know that the talk title said, you've launched the app then, but really, marketing needs to start before the app is launched. Maybe even when, the first instant you get an idea. And that is when you need to start thinking about how do you get your app out there, and how do you start collecting email addresses and getting your idea in front of the people who need to see it. But keep in mind that marketing is not a substitute for a bad app experience. You still got to have good user experience. You got to have, you can't have bugs. You can't have poor performance. Because 90% of users report they stop using an app due to poor performance, blah, blah, blah. We all know this. Have a good app, but then add marketing in on top of it. So make sure you have a good user experience in your app. You're solving a need and reduce bugs and errors. All right, next, the first big marketing tip, and this is something that a lot of people completely forget about, is to do market research. This sounds very professional and large and huge and whatnot, but it just means making sure that you have a need for what you're building. One way I like to do this is looking at potential competitors, see what else is out there, see what other people are doing, look at what they're doing well, see where you can improve upon their services, learn from what other people are doing. Look at how they are marketing their app. Look at their keywords. Look at the description. Start forming ideas. Look at the reviews. This is a great place for you to see, get ideas for features for your app and things that you could do better than them. Like, look directly at what their customers are complaining about and what their customers are raving about. There's a lot of services out there that help you do competitive analysis. And this is a blog post, actually, that goes over services and how to do competitive analysis. And there's companies like AppBot that also does this competitive analysis and kind of formulates this research for you. This is a place where you need to start thinking about how you're going to describe your app. How do you tell people about your app? What is your elevator pitch? When you have only a few words or a sentence in order to describe what you're building, start this at the very beginning, when you start building it out, because as you meet people at conferences like this, practice explaining the app and how you're going to talk to people about it. You're going to use what you learned here. You're going to use that elevator pitch, that short sentence, that really exciting way of describing your app in all your marketing to come. Every time you set up new materials or when you set up your App Store listing. Figure it out earlier rather than later. This is actually a website. It's not an app. This is my website. And this is technically this is my book. This is technically what my book is about. My book is an introduction. One of my books is an introduction to Python and Django. But this is a boring description. This is a terrible headline. A better headline would be that my book teaches you how to build a web app. Now, this is what I mean in terms of elevator pitch. It can't just be short and sweet and easy to say, but it also needs to talk benefits, not details. You want to tell someone how it's going to affect them positively instead of just what your building is doing. So figuring out your elevator pitch, how you're going to title your app, how you're going to describe it earlier on, is going to help you refine it and find your best version as you're building your app. Next up. Early on, before your app is built, when you're working on your idea, this is when you can start, you can set up a landing page and start building your email list. Very early on. A lot of people leave this until the very last moment. That means that when you come to conferences like this and you talk to people and they say, hey, what are you working on? And you're like, oh, I'm working on so-and-so. And that person goes, wow, that's awesome. I'd love to. Let me know when it's launched. And then 6 or so months later, you're launching and you're like, who was that person? Where did they go? How do I tell them? By having a landing page and a place where you can start collecting emails, as early on the process, means you're going to start building up your audience as early as possible. And building that audience and getting that list of people who are interested in what you built will help you on launch day. So you can have fancy pants landing pages like this, announcing your app, this is where you're going to take that elevator pitch, the description, you can put it on your page, start playing around with different versions, see how people react to it. But even, you don't have to spend a lot of time on this landing page design. There's a lot of places on the internet where you can just point, click, grab a template, throw it up there, so you can spend the time that you need to build your app. So you don't have to spend a lot of time also building your landing page when you're trying to build what you're trying to build. Just get a template up and get a little form on there, and then you can start coming to these conferences and telling people and start building that list. Now, in terms of list building, of course, there's 1.5 billion startups out there that all focus on this, like MailChimp and Campaign Monitor and Drip and ConvertKit. So just use whatever works for you. Most of these things are all free. But when you're building your email list, it's tempting to just have a sign-up form. And as you are working on what you're working on, and people are seeing it and signing up, they sign up, and then say a year later, you finally launch, and you send out that launch email being like, hey, you signed up to know what's going on with my app. It's finally out there. And that person says, it has been a year. I totally forgot about you. And they can unsubscribe. They don't know why they're still on that list. Don't let your list go stale. Set up, one thing I like to do is when I'm setting up a new email list is to automatically set up email list automation. So they get an email when they first join the list, And then there's an email that's like 3 months later that could be like, hey, you signed up because you're interested in this topic. I'm still working on this, but here is a extra blog post around this topic to look at. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is to not let your list go stale. It's not just you have to set up a newsletter list, but also set up send over emails like semi-regularly so people know that you're still alive. And ConvertKit also has this whole flow for doing these emails. Now, all the suggestions I've had so far have been free, and this one can cost a lot of money. But depending on where you are and what you're working on, this could be a really great way to start marketing your app. You can build a product video. There we go. So there's this website. It's called literally howmuchtomakeavideo.com if you're curious how much it's going to cost. And this website will walk you through, you're like, I want human actors or animations and maybe a voiceover, but minimal music. And you can go through this flow and get an estimated price for the kind of video that you want. So this is really great. So if you're considering getting a video made for your landing page for your product launch, this is a good place to start. You don't have to work with a company that has this little workflow, but I like it because it's not often you can actually get real prices on the internet. This is also the time, again, before your app is launched, to start researching forums and communities that are in the area of what you're working in. So if you're building something for developers, this is the time when you go find developer communities and start interacting with them, not to pitch what you're doing, but just to become a member of that community. My startup is called Wedding Lovely. It's in the wedding space. I'm actually not a weddings person, but I'm on all the wedding lists, and I follow a bunch of wedding influencers out there because I need to know what people are talking about and what's the trends going on, and I can participate and become a member of that community. This is going to help you learn more about the area that you're jumping into. It could give you insights into features that people want. It could give you users eventually for your app. But to start interacting as early as possible is very, very good, because a lot of people will launch an app and then realize that there was actually no need for it. The only person that wanted it was them. So this is a great way to start knowing that there is a need for your app. So there's lots and lots of communities online. If you're building an app for designers, there's designer news. For developers, there's hacker news. There's Reddit. There's everything. And essentially, I want you to talk to customers, talk to potential customers, go to trade shows, go to events, go to meetups, join forums, use Slack, read subreddits, follow people on the internet, follow the influencers and people who are the heads of that industry. Get to know the area that you're jumping into, and it's going to help you make a better app, and it's going to help you be a part of that industry when you're launching and make it easier for you to market to that industry. And then this is the bulk of my presentation. This is my favorite way of marketing, and it kind of sucks for people who are like me, who would much rather just build a product that just wants to work in code. But content marketing, writing blog posts about what you're doing and sharing the stuff that you're working on is by far the best way to market what you're building. It's so hot right now. Love content marketing. This is the place where you can tell your story. This is the place where you can talk about what you're building and why you're building it and why you found that there's a need for it and what are the challenges that you found and what is the cool feature that you just hit on and what's that cool code thing that you just figured out. There's this really cool, series that I found of Stuart Hall, who did the app bot I mentioned earlier. So what he did is he wrote this blog post talking about his experience launching an app on the App Store. So he wrote this blog post, and it did really well. And it got a lot of views, it got 20,000 views. And then, of course, he took that, he had his app, he took his blog post, he turned it into an ebook, which is also very hot right now, talking about how he got 2.3 million app downloads, and here's all the things that he did without spending 1 cent on marketing. Obviously, he spent a lot of time collecting this information. So he took his content, He took his app experience and he made content out of that. He used the content as marketing for the products that he was doing. And then his app was acquired. And the person who acquired said that they probably wouldn't have considered buying his app had he wasn't public with his story, had he hadn't told the story about how he launched his app and what he did. So not only is content marketing good as marketing for your app and getting people to share what you're doing, it actually could lead to a potential acquisition. Writing is good for marketing that does not look like marketing. Because you know when someone goes onto Twitter and there's like constantly spamming, like, I built this, check it out, I built this, check this out. People are like, self-promotion. Well, when someone says, hey, I wrote 1,000 words on how I taught myself Swift and I built my first app, it's like you're giving back, you're giving info back and ideas to the community. You're plugging what you've built. But it's promotion that doesn't look like promotion. It's less like self-promotion. Now here, there's a lot of common complaints. It could be like, I'm terrible at writing. I don't want to write. I'm a developer. I'm a designer. So the thing with writing, the hard thing is, the more you do it, the better you'll get. I promise. Just, you have to get over that hump of like the first few blog posts, or maybe even more. You have to continue to write even when you think you're not really good at writing, because you will get better. So this is a place where you can recruit your friends and other people and have them review what you've written and get their feedback. You can recruit your potential customers on your newsletter to give a review on a draft blog post. Asking for help is also hard, but it will help you become better at writing. Another complaint is that writing takes too long, and I totally hear you because, again, you much be rather spending the time you have on building what you're trying to build instead of writing that blog post about building what you're trying to build, right? So when it comes to writing taking a long time, one of my biggest tips for writing, as a non-writer, as someone who hates writing, I learned this in university, is that you write your first post, your first draft, without going backwards. So you write, sometimes people will write that first paragraph, and they'll write the first paragraph, and then their brain is like, oh, that first paragraph is awful. That intro was terrible. There's that grammar mistake over there, and there's a spelling mistake over here, and then you erase that first paragraph, and you rewrite it, and then 3 hours later, you're still working on that first paragraph. So turn off that part of your brain and just write. Just write that first draft out. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about continuity. Just get that first draft out. Every bit of information you wanted to write about. Then close your computer, go outside, come back, and I guarantee, absolutely, it's magic. It'll be much better than what you thought it was. You come back to it, and you're like, oh, and it'll be easier to edit and fix those problems. And the overall writing process will go way faster. Also, posts don't have to be long. You don't have to write a 2,000-word blog post when you're trying to just share what you're working on. Just you can write a couple paragraphs and have some screenshots, but just produce some content, talk about what you're building, and that's going to help you market what you're building. And then last, some people say, but I have nothing original to say. There is 1.5 billion blog posts out there about how I launched my first app, my first Android or iOS app. Why would anyone read mine? The thing with writing is just because you wrote it makes it unique. And people want to see posts that are on the same subject. People read multiple posts. So don't worry about being completely original, just write. And there's lots of ideas out there for what to write about. And this is where the things that you've set up will start tying together. So you have your landing page with your blog, with your newsletter form in there, and then your landing page has that elevator pitch on there, and then you're going to take what you've written on your blog post and you're going to tie that into that mailing list. And that's the way you're going to keep your mailing list active, and so people don't forget about you. Justin Jackson is really big into the marketing bootstrappers world, and he does this. When he writes a new blog post, he takes it to his newsletter, does a little bit of an intro about why he wrote that blog post, and links it over to it. So he has the advantage of writing, but also keeping his newsletter active, and people, are more engaged with what he is doing. And then this is the place you can also start setting up some social media. And I don't mean, like, all these little things shouldn't take a ton of time. The writing part does take time. But you can set up your blog posts so they automatically post to like Twitter or Facebook or whatnot. So you have these areas that are looking active because they have what you've written. But they're there in case someone comes along and goes, wait, that's something I need. And then they can go to your landing page, then sign up for your newsletter. And then you can collect these customers before you even launched your app. So yeah, just, like this one for app bots, where they just like post their updates and their blog posts. But it could be even more of a community thing. Like this, Smule does karaoke. And they have almost 10 million likes on Facebook, which is mind-blowing to me. Or if your app is something that involves pretty pictures or the potential for quotes, you can use something like Instagram, like the Calm app, which has over like 110,000 followers. And all it is just a nice image with a quote on it. But they built this community in Instagram. There's a lot of services out there to help you manage social media postings, to help save you time. Because again, your time should be spent on building your app. But you can use things like Meet Edgar, Buffer is another one. And use these services to save you time and just make sure that what you've written are being published on these social media outlets. And then those communities that you're a part of, those communities that were around the app of what you're trying to build, then you take what you've written and you can start sharing that on the communities. You shouldn't be just like, oh, read what I've written. But you can start giving back in a way. You can start talking about the things that you've learned. And that's another way you can start interacting and being a part of those communities and getting people invested in your story before your app's launched. One hack I have for whenever I share my content on external communities is that to always try to emphasize or try to get a lot of comments. Because when you're on, like, say, Reddit, and there's a post and it says 0 comments under the post, it's like, well, that looks kind of boring. But if you look at it and it says 20 comments, you're like, oh, there's a discussion there. Maybe the people will more likely to click on your article if there's a lot of comments. So if someone responds to it, like, first thing you do when you post, actually, you can write a comment saying, hi, I'm so-and-so. I wrote this post, happy to answer any questions you have. Automatically have 1 comment on your post. And then anytime someone else responds, they're like, oh, even like, they say, like, thank you. You can be like, you're welcome. Automatically 3 comments. So always respond to other people's comments. Try to get that comment number up. And it's going to lead to more people clicking through to what you've written. And tie it into your mailing list. Make sure your mailing list continues to be active while you're in this development process. You can use the people who join your mailing list as beta users. So you're starting to form an internal community. In essence, while you're building your app, you also need to start working on building a community of people around your app and what you're doing, because it's going to help your launch day. This is the 1,000 true fans that Kevin Kline talks about. You could have 1 million bored fans that aren't invested in what you're doing, or you can have 1,000 true fans. And these are the people who are invested, that are going to take what you've built and share with their friends and tell their family. And they're the people who are going to help you maybe make your app viral. So you want to really work on building that little community of passionate people as early as possible. So now is the launch stuff. There's a lot of things around launching your app with lots of to-do lists and lists for you to go through when you launch your app on the internet. So I'm just going to skim through this section. The main thing to remember is to make a plan. And a lot of people who are like launching their app will also write down in one giant list everything they need to do. They need to launch the app. They need to post it here. And they need to do this. They need to do that. They need to do that. And it goes to 100 items long. And I find that very overwhelming, having a huge list. I wake up in the morning and I look at that list and I'm like, holy moly, that's so much to do. What I like to do is split up what I need to do into months or weeks or days, but split it up. So the day of, it's not like I have 100 things to do, potential ideas for how to get the word out about what I've built. But it's like that day, I'm only working on, say, 2 things. And the next day, I have another 2 things. The next day, I have another 2 things. This is crucial for me as a product person to keep myself not burning out. And of course, App Store optimization. Don't forget about this part. This is something that's been covered a lot in a lot of other places. So I'm just going to skim through this. But it's all on this presentation for later if you want to keep it or share it. So of course, have a good eye-catching icon. Don't be like this. There's 1.5 billion check marks out there. Every to-do list app just goes straight to having a check mark. So there's a lot of resources online from Apple and Android and whatnot on how to do a nice icon. Like Smashy Magazine has this great article about how to design a really nice icon. Research keywords, which is going to be important for the keyword field on iOS, but also because you're going to be using that in the Android description field. And there's things online to help you research those keywords. Like on Google's AdWords has a keyword planner. This is the thing, though, is like you should have some keywords in mind because you did that before when you did your research, your market research. But this is a place where you can refine it and really find like the full length of all the keywords you want to use to market your app. And track how well your keywords are doing. This is not just something you do once and forget about it. But your app might go up, and then you can look and see how well you're doing for different keywords and replace things as needed and track things, see how things are going. Optimize your app name. Again, you should have done this research a little bit beforehand when you worked on your elevator pitch. But this is the place where it really matters, is when you create your App Store listings. So clear and unique, doesn't show the brand names, lots of specific information about this part. The title of the app should be unique and creative, but also clear, and preferably short and on point. Again, your elevator pitch. So this is all tying together with the launch day. In iOS, you have your subtitle. And then work on your description. This is very important for both app stores, not only for Google, because they're using that for how to do rankings, because there's no keyword, but also look at your first sentence, your first few sentences, because that's the thing that people are going to read most. So not only do you want to write a nice description in its entirety, but you want to emphasize for that first sentence to be as clear and precise as possible. And create a press kit. Take your icons, take that elevator pitch that you have, create that description, and put it all into one package. So it's going to make it very easy after your app is launched to share it with other people. So there's this great article here about how to create a press kit for your app that kind of lists all the different pieces that you would need for a press kit. OK, post-launch. Keep writing. Always be content marketing. Always be writing. Talk about how well your app did. What was the launch day like? What you learned from it. What you found unexpected. This is the writing process is something that you can continually do. Even if you launch other apps, it's going to, again, start building that 1,000 true fans around you as a content creator. And it's going to make it easier for you to market not only your current project, but your projects down the road. And then for the actual specific things to do for your app, you can submit to review sites. There's 1.5 billion review sites out there, so this could be something that takes up a lot of time. But don't forget about places like Product Hunt. So Product Hunt, I actually just did a Product Hunt launch 2 days ago, which was kind of fun. But Product Hunt, you take that press kit, those images you had, that elevator pitch, that description you formulated, and you can take all those things and move it into and do a Product Hunt launch. And it could be a place that you can get a lot of users. And if you look at your specific communities, again, if you're building something for developers, you might want to share onto Hacker News, their show page. Now, you can do a lot of cold emailing. I did this a lot with my products. I just send out 1 billion emails to people saying, hey, I built this. Do you want to check it out? You can pitch it to blogs and potential users. Take that press kit that you made and send it along in email. And personalize your emails for the people. So this is a product I did about 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I guess. But you can see I do a lot of cold emailing. A few people, the thing with cold emailing is most people aren't going to respond, but some people did, which is good, because I was able to get those users and get those people onto the project that I was building. So some guidelines when you're cold emailing. Keep your messages short and sweet. You don't want to write an essay when you're sending an email. Everyone's seen that email where the person just gives their life story about why they've built what they've built, and then at the very bottom they have a little link telling you to check it out. And you've already checked out, you've already turned off your brain at the first paragraph. So when you're sending someone an email, asking them to review what you've done, keep it short, very short. Again, the elevator pitch that you formulated beforehand, perfect place to use it. And sound like a human. A lot of people email other people stuffy and professional and very uptight, and they sound like a robot. But you are a human, and you built something, and that's awesome. And you're trying to share it with other people. And so I look at emails and cold emails as a way of starting a conversation with someone. So don't feel free to add an emoji in there or do some silly wording. But don't make it stodgy and cold. Try to make it a little bit fun and sound like a human. Now, if you're emailing potential users, tell them what the benefit is. You're not just telling them about your app. And it's like that headlines I showed you before, my book about Python and Django. It's not just oh, I built this. You have to say, I built this, and this is how it's going to affect you. This is how it's going to improve your workflow, your life, whatever. So in that email, in that short and sweet email you're sending to someone, make sure you tell them how it's going to benefit them. And it's better to do this just by copy pasting and switching out words and altering it a little bit per email than using an automated service. There's a lot of newsletter things online. This is not where you're going to use your newsletter when you're trying to get users. You don't want to just upload a email list and then everything has a unsubscribe link and people are don't do that. Do it a little manually. This is every single email here. There's a lot more. Was all me opening up an individual window in Gmail, pasting it in, altering it a little bit, and sending it out. And it's coming from my Gmail address, and it looks more human. And then use something like Boomerang for Gmail or something else, so you know to follow up. So if someone doesn't respond in the first week or so, you can send them over a little human, hey, just seeing if you saw this type stuff. Just don't be obnoxious. Just do one follow-up, and that's it. Now, the last little things, I'm just going to rush through them. You can run giveaways to promote what you've built, but there's a lot of pitfalls there. So there's a good article that kind of goes over the pros and cons of running a giveaway. You can use affiliate links for additional revenue and tracking. There's an affiliate revenue program through Apple. You can collaborate with other businesses. This could be really awesome. If there's a business out there that you can collaborate with where it's a win-win, they promote your thing and you promote their thing, it could be a way for you to get more users for your app. But proceed with caution. In the 9 or so years of me building products and running a business, probably about 99% of the collaborations I've done, I've regretted because it was too much time for the amount of leads or customers I got at the end. So do your due diligence, really investigate how much time you'd have to do when you're working on this collaboration with this other business. It could be the thing that changes what you've built. Or it could be something that takes too much time, and you spend too much time focusing on that than, say, improving your app. So do your due diligence. And you could look into doing advertising. I'm not a big fan of advertising because this is not my full-time job, and I will probably just lose $1,000 without even in a minute, and I'd be what? So I personally don't do paid advertising, but something you can look into. And beyond just the usual advertising routes of, say, Google or Facebook, this is a place where you can look at those communities that you've participated in and see if that's a better channel for you. It might be a place, you might lose a lot of money off of Google's and off AdWords and Facebook, but these smaller communities will take less money. It might give you more of a benefit, and it's easier to learn how to advertise in these smaller communities than, say, some of the big networks. So take a look at these smaller areas. And don't forget to use updates to remarket your app. So when you send an update over, don't just be bug fixes. This is a place where you can remind someone about why they're using your app and why it's awesome. So update your release notes and be like, OK, cool. This is what we did, and this is why our app is awesome. And that way you have like a little reminder to your customers. And you can perhaps translate your app for other markets. This could be something that could also just make get you so many users for your apps, but this something could also take a lot of time. So that's another avenue for marketing your app after it's launched. And last but not least, coming to conferences like this and doing a conference talk and talking about, it's like the audio version of this blog post. Talk about what you've learned and how you built it and why it's awesome. On stage could be, if your customers, other developers, it could be a really great way of marketing your app, as long as you aren't obnoxious about it. But that's another avenue. And throughout all of this, watch your stats. Don't forget to look at how well the efforts you're doing, the time you spend working on marketing rather than design or development. You want to make sure it's worth it. And so make sure to look at your stats and see how well your efforts are doing. And don't do the things that aren't working out for you. But you have to look at those analytics. All right, wrapping up. Resources for more. Of course, there's a lot of podcasts and everything out there. This is really great to be part of the community and hear other people talk about the challenges and what they've learned about building apps. And of course, we have Sophie Sandel, who is here. But not only just like app development, we can look at the bootstrappers community as a whole. So this is Stacking the Bricks by Amy Hoy. Really great, talks about bootstrapping and solopreneurs and people who are working on their own, just building products. Marketing for Developers is another great resource by a friend of mine. Indie Hackers is an awesome community. Because when you're building products, it can get very lonely. You can forget about how hard it is to market. It can be, you can't just get into doldrums. And these communities are inspiring, and a lot of them talk about marketing and how to do it, and they help people out, help each other out. Reddit communities like iOS programming and Android dev. And when you use these communities, one of my favorite things to do is to search for how and see what other people have been writing about. And it's a great place to get more inspiration and see the things that happened in the past you might have missed. So in conclusion, marketing, it can suck. It can totally suck. I'm a product person. I love to build. But when you build something, you have to help it be seen. You can't just release it into the world and assume that the world's going to notice it without any effort at all. When you build something super awesome, you also have to spend the time to make sure that other people know how to find it and make sure people see it and know about it. I was once at a startup roundtable, and someone asked very seriously, they're like, how do I go viral? I was like, oh, if only that was an easy answer to respond, to answer, or easy question to answer. But when you build something, and it gets into the right hands, and you get those reviews, and the people who come up to you at conferences, and they say, oh, I used what you've built, and it was awesome, and they thank you for it, that makes all that time and energy and everything you put into marketing absolutely worth it. So thank you for having me. So quick notes, I'm not going to take questions. So you can come up to me afterwards, because I think the thing is wrapping up. But I also have my book. It says web design, but it's also for visual design stuff. So if you'd like to check out my book, find me afterwards as well. Thank you.